We're on our own.
Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight on this Wednesday, March 20th. Alderman Ed Burke's practice of loaning out staff members to other aldermen free of charge comes under scrutiny. An incumbent alderman and a former economic policy advisor for Mayor Rahm Emanuel face off in our 43rd Ward Candidate Forum.
I love it. I think it's so cool to be out on the lake
And we visit an ice fishing event in North Suburban Wakanda. All that and more next on Chicago Tonight. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what's happening in Chicago tonight. A new report says the number of Catholic priests in Illinois accused of child sexual abuse is more than double the amount previously disclosed by the Catholic bishops of Illinois. The 185-page report comes from advocate attorneys who specialize in childhood sexual abuse cases. It includes names and photos of 395 priests and lay people in the church who've been publicly accused, as well as their parish assignments. Speaking today alongside several survivors, attorney Jeff Anderson said he believes the church, which has only shared a total of 192 names, is protecting the identities of other potential abusers and those who knew about alleged abuse.
Those clerics who they have deemed to be what they call credibly accused. That means that the Catholic bishops decided they had committed the crimes and thus put them on their list. Our list has more than 203 names in addition to theirs. Why is that so?
In a statement today, the Archdiocese of Chicago said that it has identified 22 of its own priests on the Anderson list released today, most of whom are deceased, in addition to those already named on its website. It also says it reports all allegations it receives to civil authorities. Passengers at O'Hare might notice more construction as the city breaks ground on a $1.2 billion expansion at Terminal 5 for the first new gates in 30 years.
This is our first new gates here at the International Terminal in almost 3 decades. Back then, we used to fly to 30 international destinations. Today, Chicago flies to 75 international destinations. O'Hare Airport is the best connected airport in the United States of America and #2 in the world.
This is the first phase of a project that'll eventually increase the size of the 25-year-old terminal by 350,000 square feet. That'll make room for new passenger amenities, airline lounges, and concessions. Under the O'Hare 21 plan, more improvements are expected by the year 2021. Among them, 10 new gates and more parking spaces for planes, 15 new dining and retail locations, and an expanded checkpoint with 6 new security lanes. And one of the world's most renowned operatic singers is marking a landmark anniversary in Chicago.
I can smell the sea.
Superstar soprano Renee Fleming made her lyric opera of Chicago debut 25 years ago, just as she was emerging as one of the operatic world's most celebrated voices. In more recent years, Fleming has taken on added roles with the opera company, becoming its first ever creative consultant. Fleming will take part in an all-star gala at Lyric this weekend in celebration of her 25th anniversary. Eddie Aruza had a conversation with her this afternoon.
Oh, it has been such a wonderful, wonderful time. I mean, so many terrific performances, roles that I love, and also being creative consultant here for the last number of years has given me a new perspective, a broader perspective of not only lyric opera, but the city and really the city's support for culture, which is tremendous.
And you can see more of the conversation with Renee Fleming on our website. As for the weather on this first day of spring, tonight a chance of a few more showers before 11, otherwise cloudy with a low around 34. Tomorrow cloudy, then clearing and a high near 48. Also tonight, a handful of aldermen have gotten behind an effort to curb a controversial practice that Chicago Tonight first reported last week. That is, Alderman Ed Burke's habit of loaning staff members on his powerful City Council Finance Committee out to other aldermen free of charge in an apparent attempt to gain loyalty. Burke is, of course, no longer chairman of that committee, but a new effort seeks to end this practice for good. And Paris Schutz is here with more. Paris.
Brandis, this ordinance was introduced in City Council several weeks ago, and it attempts to ban this practice that you just talked about of having powerful committee chairs like Ed Burke loan out employees from their committee, paid for by their committee, out to other aldermen on their personal staffs free of charge. Now, this ordinance was introduced by 43rd Ward Alderman Michelle Smith, signed on by about 7 of her colleagues. And this is a practice that Burke had employed as head of the Committee on Finance for several decades. We uncovered last week at least 5 city council members and now a 6th that took Burke up on this offer last year before he stepped down from his perch. And they are 2nd Ward Alderman Brian Hopkins, who has shepherded that Lincoln Yards project, 13th Ward Alderman Marty Quinn, who is House Speaker Mike Madigan's alderman, 19th Ward Alderman Matt O'Shea, 27th Ward Alderman Walter Burnett, 36th Ward Alderman Gilbert Villegas, he is the Latino Caucus Chair, and 38th Ward Alderman Nick Spazzato. And in each case, the aldermen we spoke to said that they didn't believe there was any expectation from Alderman Burke of some kind of quid pro quo for this. They say they didn't feel like their arm was twisted to vote a certain way from Burke because they got this perk. And other aldermen, though, say that this is not the case. There's many aldermen that did not take Burke up on this offer, and they say that he expected loyalty in return for this use of taxpayer resources. Now, this ordinance says, quote, committee staff must only work on committee matters and cannot perform duties related to the individual responsibilities of any alderman. Council staff may not be loaned to aldermen, other committees, or any city department, office, or board.
Now, Paris, remind us, why did aldermen take Burke up on this offer?
Well, each of the 50 aldermen, Brandis, they're allotted about $184,000 a year for an office staff, and they get to fill 3 positions in their ward. Many aldermen say that's not enough. They have so much work to do in their ward. They need more people. So one of the ways that they can get additional staff members is to go to Burke and ask him for some staff members. And this was, of course, when he was chairman of the Finance Committee. And so to put this in perspective, the Finance Committee is the largest committee on City Council. It has a budget just for personnel, just for wages and pension and stuff, of $1.8 million and has 46 staff members on there at last count. So this is a large, giant pool of resources that can be used, as we found, to loan out to alderman staff free of charge. They don't have to use their aldermanic money to pay for this. Now, one alderman told us, he didn't want to be quoted, but that with this sizable budget, the Finance Committee is also paid for things like office expenses for individual aldermen out of the Finance Committee budget. And this gets to the heart of this whole notion of committee chairmanship. So there are 16 committees on City Council. There's a Finance Committee, a Rules Committee, Aviation, Education, and there are committee chairs. And this is a plum position. This is a position that aldermen really want, and the mayor historically has picked this person. And the reason is because of what comes along with it. So if you're a committee chair, you get extra jobs with it and other things. This was addressed at the debate on ABC 7. Both candidates say they want city council members to choose their committee chairs. So we've put in multiple calls to Alderman Ed Burke to get him to comment on this. We talked to Alderman Pat O'Connor, who said that they are complying with a records request we put in to get more information on all of this.
Nice work. Paris Schutz, thank you.
You're welcome.
And as a reminder, you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also watch via podcast and the PBS video app. Up next, Carol Marine and the candidates running for 43rd Ward Alderman.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
In her first 2 elections for 43rd Ward Alderman, Michelle Smith did not have a walk in the park. She found herself in runoffs in 2011 and 2015. This time around, nothing has changed. 6 candidates vied for 43rd Ward Alderman in the general election last month. The 43rd Ward includes all or parts of Lincoln Park, Old Town, and the Gold Coast. It's also home to DePaul University and North Avenue Beach, and is next door to the proposed site for the controversial Lincoln Yards development. Joining us now in the order they appear on the ballot are runoff candidates Michelle Smith, alderman of the 43rd Ward. Before that, she served as Democratic committeeman of the 43rd, and a post that she kept until 2016. Derek Lindblom, who before running for alderman was vice president of 7 Wire Ventures, a Chicago-based healthcare investment firm. Lindblom also served as chief of staff to Mayor Rahm Emanuel's Economic Council between 2011 and 2014. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
To Chicago Tonight.
Thank
you.
So
let's talk taxes. Chicago has an unfunded liability, a shortfall of almost $100 million for 2019. Alderman, how do we make that up?
Well, what we won't do is do a repay of what we just went through with Derek Lindblom's failed pension plan that was ruled unconstitutional unanimously by the Illinois Supreme Court, and which forced us to raise property taxes by state law. Now we have a lot of options in front of us. We have a new governor. We have the ability to look at ideas that are on the table from our governor, the Civic Federation, and what we will do is look at creative solutions, including
Name
a possible,
one. Name one for me.
Well, we certainly are looking at, of course, cannabis and casinos and a variety of different kinds of revenue. The Civic Federation has recommended one kind of income tax. The governor has recommended another. There's service taxes, and there's also continuing to look at things like combining pensions. But what we need to do now is to move forward and overcome the wasted time and effort that we did when a pension plan that my opponent really touts as his signature achievement was struck down by the Illinois Supreme Court.
So I think this is the first place to start, which is we listened to Alderman Smith in her last election say that she wasn't going to go to the property tax, and then 6 months later voted for the largest property tax increase in city history. There are options like cannabis, but also reducing the size of government and being thoughtful what we're spending our money on. The answer is not a city income tax, and I strongly disagree with my opponent on that.
So everyone talks about cutting waste and fraud out of government. What is your preferred place for the largest bang for the buck?
So I think you have to look at city-county consolidation. We consolidated the city and county's workforce systems that were doing the exact same thing into one arrangement, saved taxpayer dollars, and delivered better services. I think we can look at a lot of duplicative government functions in Illinois and in the city of Chicago and county and reduce the spend.
What's the dollar amount on that?
So I think you can actually get to $50 to $100 million through that. You can also look at things like cannabis and sports betting, as my opponent mentioned. And we have to look at things like the alternative annuity many aldermen have been taking to spike their pensions over a teacher or someone who's working on a garbage truck. Aldermen should be doing the same thing everyone else should.
Well, again, many of those are pretty small items. I'm probably the only one who's in city council who's actually enacted measures to reduce the size of government. We formed an absenteeism task force that looked at waste and overspending by our own city employees and cut absenteeism in half at Streets and Sand, CDOT, and at water management. These are the kinds of practical things that you do every day to try to reduce costs. But the real question is that one of the reasons we got here is that we wasted years on the pension solution that my opponent touts so much. And I vowed that we would not raise property taxes unless every other alternative had been reached, and we did that. In 2016, when that pension plan failed, we were forced by state law to do it.
But there were other problems besides the pension plan failing, and in fact, property taxes are the thing that your constituents dread more than anything, and your businesses dread more than anything.
And that's exactly why I've pledged that we will not go to property taxes.
Is that a pledge that you honestly can make?
Absolutely.
I agree with Alderman Smith's pledge not to raise property taxes. I agreed with it 4 years ago, before she voted for the biggest property tax hike in city history 6 months later. We have to look to alternative solutions. We have to run out our biggest problems. Alderman Smith has had 8 years to confront our pension and debt crisis, to confront the issues we have with our city government financial structure. She hasn't done it. It's time for a change.
Well, you might argue, you've worked for Mayor Emanuel, and you might argue then he hasn't done it either, correct?
I think we've made real progress in that first term. We actually went at the pension problem when we negotiated between 28 out of 31 labor unions, Chicago Tribune editorial board, Chicago Sun-Times, Crane Chicago. What you're seeing there is real progress. What the alderman's done in city council hasn't been anything. Well, we have to attack these big problems. If we just keep kicking the can, we're never going to get anywhere solutions.
We certainly agree that we're not kicking the can down the road. But the truth is, Derek, who again led the charge on this, never negotiated an agreement not to sue. And those unions, as soon as the ink was dry, sued, and then the Illinois Supreme Court ruled it all unconstitutional, wiping out times of work. I actually started working on pensions the minute I got into office, and Derek is wrong in that.
Let's shift gears here a second, because City Council right now is fraught with a lot of problems. You have colleagues who are in legal trouble, in federal trouble, and so my question to you has to do with the Inspector General and whether the Inspector General's domain should increase. His oversight should be expanded to take a look at, among other things, City Council committees.
Absolutely, and I've led the charge in 2016 to actually put the Inspector General in charge of City Council for the first time, and then ran the vote to have the Inspector General have jurisdiction over committees. And that's the very famous vote in 2016 that we got all the way to the floor of City Council with a majority of council. And on the day of council, Joe Moore switched his vote and Ed Burke voted against it.
So, Mr. Lindblom, what about you on the Inspector General?
Yes, and I agree with it, and I agreed with it back in 2014 when Alderman Smith decided not to take the tough vote, and 6 aldermen voted to increase Inspector General authority. 42 aldermen voted against it, and 2 aldermen, including Alderman Michelle Smith, walked off the floor instead of taking the vote. And I think if you avoid these tough decisions on ethics, you can't get anywhere. It's easy to be with ethics now that it's popular. Well, I think we have to look with it when it was hard, because we got a lot of hard choices coming up, and we need someone who's going to take those political risks.
I have to say, I really don't know where Derek was ever on record supporting any of this in 2014 when he wasn't even in our ward. But I will say this. I've been working on ethics since the day I got to City Council, fighting against the fake legislative Inspector General in my first vote in City Council. Every moment that I've been in City Council, I've worked on reform, passing COFA, the Council Office of Financial Accountability, getting streaming through just now after many, many years, getting more transparency on tips. I have an unbroken record, and my opponent wants to talk about one missed vote because he absolutely does not want to actually talk about my record.
Well, I'll actually talk about more than one missed vote. I think one of the key controversial ethics things we have going on is side jobs. I'm for banning all aldermanic side jobs. I will be a full-time alderman from day one. Alderman Smith said she would be a full-time alderman and then took $288,000 in a side job from her biggest campaign contributor. We have to ban these aldermanic side jobs. They're a door to corruption in our system and a way to legally give aldermen income. We have to close that door.
Well, I am a full-time alderman, and once again, my opponent is lying about an issue. I did have a job with a nonprofit arts foundation, and in 2015, my constituents told me they didn't like it, so I quit the job and I returned every penny I ever earned because it was the right thing to do, even though it was perfectly ethically okay.
And actually, it's important to say there, it was actually running afoul of federal self-dealing laws, and there's an IRS document that foundation submitted that says very clearly that as soon as Alderman Smith realized she counted as a government official who's not allowed to receive foundation income, she had to quit the job. And I think the idea of saying she quit it because she wanted to and not because she was legally forced to is not true.
Alderman Smith, one last word on this before we switch.
Yeah, and that's just not true. Derek was not involved in these proceedings, and in fact, as soon as this issue came up for the first time, we brought all this material to their attention, and he's decided to continue with this lie because honestly, his entire campaign is based on negative without really any new ideas.
2 very quick questions. Charter schools, and this is just a very short answer. Are you for more of them in the ward or not?
You know, we don't have any charter schools in the 43rd ward, and I doubt we ever will.
I'm not. I plan to send my son to our local public schools, which are fantastic.
Mayoral candidates, whom do you support, Mr. Lindblom?
I support Lori Lightfoot. I'm really excited about the change in Chicago for reform. I think Lori's leading the charge on reform, and I'm excited to be part of that team that works to really change the status quo in City Council.
Alderman?
And of course, I endorse Lori Lightfoot and we expect to hear more news from her. We've been we've known each other professionally for many years. We both have the same background, starting out as federal prosecutors, beginning in our career, getting very grounded in law enforcement and in justice. And I think that this will finally provide the opportunity for us to continue the reforms that we have been chipping away at for so long.
Alderman Michelle Smith, Derek Lindblom, thank you very much for spending time with us on Chicago Tonight. Brandis is back with more right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Allstate. Allstate is investing in Chicago's youth. We believe good starts young. That's why we're helping our youth develop the skills they need to achieve success in life. Allstate is proud to empower the next generation of leaders.
Today may be the first day of spring, but just a few weeks ago, the frigid weather was fit for ice fishing. Chicago Tonight's Evan Garcia visited Wakanda, Illinois, where an annual fishing tournament draws hundreds of hardy souls.
Bob Rogers gets around Bangs Lake with ease, on 4 wheels with plenty of diesel-powered torque.
It's about 365 acres. So this is rated as a fisherman's lake. The fishing here is incredible.
Today, the fishing's on ice. Hundreds of fishermen are competing in the LVVA Ice Fishing Derby in Wakanda.
Wakanda forever!
No, not the fictional home of Black Panther, the small Illinois town north of Chicago.
Right, we have people that come as far as Minnesota, Iowa, Ohio, Indiana, just to come and fish this lake.
Make sure there's nobody on that.
Bob's brother, Mike Rogers, and his friend Ryan Jacobson started the event 10 years ago.
Oh, ice fishing is great. It's not popular with everyone, and it's a certain person that wants to go and sit on ice and maybe get a little cold.
I love it. I think it's so cool to be out on the lake, and I have a huge fear of water, but for some reason I find ice fishing calming. I don't know why.
Sarah and her husband Jamie have one simple goal.
It doesn't matter how big they are as long as you catch something.
Something.
That's the strategy.
A few minutes later, mission accomplished.
On an 8 1/4 crappie. White tag.
You gotta write it down.
Volunteer judges like Wakanda resident John Elbert record fish measurements to tally the day's biggest catches. Some fishermen use a small, lightweight rod, while others use tip-ups, devices that suspend a line under the ice and flag you when a fish is caught.
Fish swims along, sees your bait, grabs it, swims away, and you gotta play.
And it works. Almost as soon as I turned my back on fisherman Joe Rizzi, he caught a largemouth bass.
Yep.
It's a catch-and-release competition.
And throw it back in, we're all good.
So all fish go back into the lake. Some fishermen brave the elements, while others fish within the comfort of a shanty.
Oh boy, welcome to the chalet. And this is kind of a little location that a lot of people come out and fish. But this gave me an opportunity to clear a lot of stuff out of the garage that we have here and build something useful.
You'll need some elbow grease to drill through the ice.
Yeah.
Unless you have a gas-powered auger.
There's a good 10, 12 inches of ice there today, which is perfect.
Generally speaking, ice is only safe to walk on if it's at least 4 inches thick. While the ice today is about 3 times that width, Chicago firefighter and paramedic Christian Howe always comes prepared with life-saving tools.
You know, if they can do that at the very least, we get a better chance of getting them out. If I do go through the ice, I can reach up, get these, and I dig them into the ice and I can pull myself out.
And if the weather gets too frigid, anyone looking to thaw out can visit a unique bar.
Come on in. So here we got a wood-burning stove. Well, it used to start out as just a regular party barge open pontoon boat, and cleared all that off and built a cabin on it and added 3 more pontoons to support the weight.
Mike Rogers said it took him about 5 years to build the solar-powered structure.
Wow.
We even have a TV.
2 of them. Turn on channel 11.
Yeah, everyone around town will hear it.
Joe prepares some explosives to mark the end of competition at 12 noon.
It's a 4-inch aerial mortar that will set off a loud explosive up in the air, is what that does. And then when they hear that, they know it's time to pull your poles out of the water.
There it is. There it is.
All right, I'll love you back then.
At the end of the event, prizes for the biggest fish caught are handed out.
Thank you guys so much.
And there were some big ones this year, like this northern pike, which measured more than 3 feet long. Or this 18.5-inch bass.
Oh, thanks, Chief.
But the Derby is about more than just ice fishing. Every year, the event raises thousands for U.S. military veterans organizations and programs. As a Navy veteran, Jacobson said the support means a lot.
I have a hard time putting it always into words. At the end of the day, I know that they're going to come through.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Evan Garcia.
And after operating expenses are factored in, event organizer Ryan Jacobson says this year's ice fishing derby will raise about $10,000 for the nonprofit TLS Veterans Outdoors. And that's our show for this Wednesday night, abbreviated to bring you special pledge programming. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing and join us tomorrow night live at 7. Mayoral candidates Lori Lightfoot and Tony Preckwinkle take on the issues in a 1-hour candidates forum. That's live at 7 here on WTTW, as well as on our website, Facebook, and YouTube, with a radio simulcast on Chicago Public Radio, WBEZ 91.5 FM. And now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, proud sponsors of the Chicago Bar Foundation's Investing in Justice campaign that supports pro bono and legal aid organizations for the needy throughout the Chicago area.